Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have unlocked a new point of controversy. Who's surprised? The mix of commercial and profitable endeavors alongside a sprinkling of visits to charities on their Australia publicized vacation doesn't just leave a bad taste. It exposes a dramatic shift to the model of Archewell and their identities as self-proclaimed philanthropists. Today we're diving into what this inaugural hybrid trip actually means for the couple and what's going on behind the scenes at Camp Sussex and Archewell, Foundation No More, and why this matters at all. Because let's be honest here, the Sussexes are so unpopular at this point and are stooping so low, and they've failed in the public eye repeatedly, time and time again, so much so that the degree to which people care about them at all, either way, is very little. They're dangerously close to slipping into complete public indifference, which is just one step before the fall into obscurity. It must be terrifying for them, I'm sure. Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelly. Welcome back to another video. Today we are talking more about Harry and Meghan's Australia trip and these broader themes that it's bringing up. And in our last video, we discussed how everything on Harry and Meghan's agenda is either commercial, meaning they're profiting from it personally, like Harry being the backup keynote speaker at a conference about workplace psychological health, which by the way, makes zero sense. Everyone agrees already that mental health within the workplace needs to be better balanced and looked after, so that means there's no value in continuing to just point out this issue and how important it is. But that's all Harry knows how to do. They should be having experts who actually know what they're talking about speak, not Harry, who has never even worked a normal job in his life, nor has he ever experienced the pressures linked to working, the pressures on life and finances and whatnot that working has. What can he really offer? Absolutely nothing. Anyway, another example is Meg's appearance at the Scam Girls Weekend, or guest judging on MasterChef, or trying to peddle some of her unsold stock of As Ever. Or they're doing non-monetary, awareness-focused activities with the goal of getting better publicity for themselves. So what that actually means is that Harry and Meghan lined up stops at a handful of organizations wherein they're not donating money or dedicating time or labor to volunteer. Each visit has been under 2 hours by far. They're just there to be morale boosters and bring awareness. And there's big problems with that model, and there's big problems with mixing charity, if you can call this that, with skeezy for-profit gigs. So let's begin with the dichotomy of a hybrid visit before we see what else they've gotten up to on this Australia trip. And really quickly, I'd like to invite you to subscribe if you have not yet already. Click like, hype, and leave me a comment down below. So last video, I'm sure you'll remember, I asked you to comment and let me know whether you think this hybrid model makes sense for Harry and Meghan or not. On one hand, now the Sussexes are private people. They have no official representations or affiliations in sight. They are not diplomats. So if they're going off to do paid speaking gigs or for-profit work, business stuff, then why not sprinkle in a handful of visits to charities or organizations if that's what they're interested in or enjoy doing? What's the big deal? In which case, from that perspective, the real question comes down to why is the media treating this as significant or important or valuable at all when it's not at all? On the other hand, we have two people with history of working with and for the monarchy who cling desperately to their titles, use their titles in business and in private. For goodness sakes, both their speaking gigs have their title splattered all over it. Meghan, on her MasterChef judging, was introduced as the Duchess of Sussex. Meg has staff announce her title to people who are coming into her vicinity. And she can't even gift her friend some ice cream without writing her title on the card like a weirdo. But the point is that they're very much wanting their public identity to remain as close to royal as possible. And they very clearly feel entitled to their titles and the privileges that they believe they should get because of their titles. Not on merit, no, but rather because they have titles. And their main vehicle for that connection for their identity to remain royal is just the titles. That's why they rely on them so heavily. And their illusion of statements from the office of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex make it seem official and kind of pull the wool over the eyes of anybody they're sending their letters and communications out to who aren't familiar of what the situation is. You'd be surprised how few people in America really fully understand the dynamic or can even tell the brothers apart, really. They're like, one of them's gonna be king, but sometimes they don't even know which one. So Harry and Meghan are kind of taking advantage of some people's ignorance. But one thing is driving this behavior for Harry and Meghan, and it's this extreme degree of self-importance. Therefore, on this other hand, it maketh no sense to intertwine self-promoting profitable gigs with charity. It creates a conflict. It makes us feel, the public watching, feel like Harry and Meghan are using their titles to elevate themselves. They use these trips to elevate themselves. They use the charity visits to elevate themselves and get pictures that they can plaster over their websites to make it look like they're doing more than they are. It's about branding. It's about marketing. It's about PR. And that's exactly why I refuse to call these charity visits charity work. Harry and Meghan and the media, who aren't paying attention, say charity work, that this aligns closely with their work with blah, blah, blah charity or cause. Harry and Meghan are not working with these charities or on these causes at all. Work implies hours spent laboring, or at least donating and being adequately informed. What Harry and Meghan do is they visit a charity, they come, they look, they take pictures, and they leave. That's not helping anyone, and that is not work. But it gives the impression that they use even the charity visits to elevate themselves, to benefit by way of better press or softening criticisms, by way of promoting a more compassionate image for themselves than what reality would demonstrate. And that's gross. It feels icky to anyone who looks closer than the headlines and the pictures. So which is more true here? Private people can do what they want, and it's the media who are making it seem more important. Or titled people who are using these methods to enhance their own personal brand for their own personal gain, soften criticisms, and elevate their own personal identity, are creating a conflict of interest here. Intertwined with this pervasive identity problem is the fact that this is their inaugural hybrid trip. Previous publicized vacations to Colombia and Nigeria in 2024 were wholly focused on not-for-profit activities. Although these were still intended to springboard the couple and Archewell into regular sponsored travel modeled after the royal family, and clearly built up their portfolio of pictures to, prove that their brand is compassionate and charitable and philanthropic and that they are humanitarians. Look at all these pictures they've taken. Just as it's clear that Megxit was a bluff, yes, we have a video coming out on this soon, be sure you're subscribed. It's now clear that 2024's publicized vacations to Colombia and Nigeria were modeled so closely after royal tours and were exclusively not-for-profit that the Sussexes believed larger foundations would sponsor them to go on trips like this regularly, allowing Harry and Meghan the publicity, the illusion of feeling or looking like they resemble the royal family still, which they clearly miss, the feeling of being part of the royal family and the reputation and cachet that came with it. But it would allow them to do all of that without the expense of such trips, because they would be convincing these larger foundations to sponsor them to go and do these trips and activities. Big surprise it didn't work, but that was clearly the intention and purpose behind those trips. The 2024 trips went down like a lead balloon, despite every attempt to control the media. That blueprint didn't sell. Not to the public and not to big donors or larger foundations or governments or anything for that matter. And we get more into that in my next video about the viability of Archewell now that they've downgraded to fiscal sponsorship and are clearly having to make big changes to that model this year. And that video will be coming out within the next few days. But this being the first hybrid sort of trip indicates that the Sussexes are not receiving invitations for travel and that they cannot afford to sponsor their own publicized vacations via Archewell and therefore are in a position where they must require business activities to be conducted during a trip in order to make it fiscally possible. Pairing that with a sprinkling of charity visits orchestrated for media exposure means that they can engage in cost sharing for a trip, still benefit from some personal brand publicity, and get some photos for their Archewell website while billing some expenses to the speaking engagements or as business expenses. And they can make a little cash while they're at it, deducting the travel for the trip from the income that they get from those business ventures on the trip. Does that make sense? They travel down to Australia, they do these charity things, and get the media pictures and the publicity that they treasure. And then they go and do some for-profit gigs, travel back. Then their paychecks only get taxed on the amount less the travel expenses. So it's almost like they're crowdfunding these ventures now. It's like a crowdfunding model to doing these things now. The bottom line is that this trip reflects not only their continued downward spiral and loss of status, but also the financial situation behind the scenes. Because if Archewell Philanthropies was in the same state as Archewell Foundation was in 2024, then Harry and Meghan would be able to finance this Australia trip without the business ventures attached. Financial disclosures suggest that the Sussexes may no longer have the luxury of purely nonprofit travel because primarily of a revenue decline, operational losses, and commercial necessities. Recent tax filings for the Archewell Foundation, which is now rebranded as Archewell Philanthropies, revealed that income plummeted from $5.3 million in 2023 to $2.1 in 2024. And there's no indication of where that money came from. It could be from the Sussexes themselves, or it could be from one of their love-bombed associates. The foundation recorded a $2.5 million loss in late 2025 as expenditures reached their highest levels to date, mostly attributed to the costs of those 2024 publicized vacations to Colombia and Nigeria. Without official royal funding behind them, the couple has to generate independent income somehow. And the Australia trip coincides with Meghan's attempt to launch as ever to Australian markets and using the country as a primary test market for these things, as well as these paid speaking gigs and C-list celebrity appearances like MasterChef guest judge. The bigger issue here is the blurring of lines, specifically when it comes to media behavior and titled individuals in particular. It sparked a new category of controversy for the couple, because the dichotomy of blending a public service image with profiting is always viewed skeptically and critically. It appears that they're using the visits to front-load positive publicity as a backdrop for the commercial events, to provide a more elevated, prestigious, and positive image for themselves. It's important to clarify that this only benefits the Sussexes, whereas with the royal family, nothing is for profit. They don't even accept free clothing or sponsors or anything of that nature. Accepting gifts is very, very restricted. All because it's diplomatic in nature. There's clear delineation and purpose behind the trips, and that's exactly the problem with the Sussexes. Public frustration has reflected this, being fueled by the use of taxpayer-funded police for security while the couple undertakes these high-priced private ventures. Over 45,000 people signed the petition, protesting any government support for the trip before they arrived. Plus, they have dwindling popularity. While they still have drawn a handful of crowds, small as they may be, local media reports, including commentary in Melbourne's Herald Sun, have described the Sussexes as grifters, reflecting a significant drop in favorability compared to their initial reception when they were working royals. And because they're no longer official, there is no user pays agreement for security. Consequently, local police departments are having to cover the cost of policing and traffic costs from their existing public budgets, which many see as unfair public subsidy for a private profit-making venture. You see, by combining these things, they have put themselves in hot water and under greater scrutiny than they have in the past. It's stirring up conversations locally of already underfunded police stations and stretched thin local budgets. The public sentiment is fairly united when it comes to the costs and entitlement of the couple. The perspective is that they're in Australia on a money-spinning commercial engagement and mooching off public resources while they're there, just so they can feel more important. But internally for the Sussexes, there's a lot more at play. The conversation went from a failed attempt to launch a sponsored Faux-Royal travel in earnest to blending commercial and charitable visits to make publicized vacations still plausible for the couple, and or to maximize for-profit travel, in this case, Australia-based paid speaking gigs and C-list appearances, by way of incorporating a handful of publicity-driven visits to bolster their public image. Either way you view it, they're still hitting this wall of conflict with the public and their own public reputations, that titled royal or royal adjacent people must be exceptionally careful when it comes to how they navigate private versus public facing events, profitable versus not-for-profit activities, which really makes the case for saving Harry and Meghan the trouble and just taking away the titles for them, so they don't have to have this conflict anymore. So while Harry and Meghan may feel that this is just simply a way to make it work or maximize the trip down to Australia for work anyway, the way they structured it is blatantly self-serving, as we discussed in the last video. By front-loading the charity visits rather than doing those at the end, they're trying to benefit themselves by softening the media exposure. Time and time again, they make the same mistake over and over. They don't foresee how the public will view it. They don't assess the risk properly, and they do things in a blatantly self-serving way with no regard to the consequences. And as a consequence, the public likes them less and less and pushes back more and more. And their popularity continues to dwindle. But leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget that Archewell Deep Dive is coming up soon, so be sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you next time. Have a happy day, everybody. Bye!